So welcome Kim Bowers to Perfect Health on Elastic FM with Elaine Godley. It's lovely to meet you, and I gather you're in Pennsylvania in America.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for the welcome, Elaine. It's very nice to meet you.
Marvellous. We just spoken briefly. You have a story that we'll go into shortly, but a key thing that you want to talk about is the power of acceptance, which I think is a really good topic. A lot of people who I've come across, myself included at times, that we challenge things, don't we? We don't accept what is. And it's amazing how when we accept whatever is our truth, our situation, then life seems to go a lot easier once we've come to that acceptance. So tell me how it is that you've come to this sort of realization and the need to kind of spread the word on the fact that you gain power from having acceptance.
I have learned through a lot of experiences, many traumatic. I know that we all have difficult lives, so I'm no stranger to that. And I have learned through time that every time I have really fallen to my knees and thought that I could not take another minute of it, I could not exist like this a minute more, the answer in all of those situations that I was given was that the thing that needed to change was always me. So we cannot change these things that happen outside of us, these external situations, but we can find the place within ourselves to accept the current situation, the current whatever it is that's in front of us, that's throwing us upside down. If we can just accept how it is instead of constantly trying to fight back against it, it opens a window for us to move through it so much more easily. It's like you can't hit that point of growth, that point of accepting the lesson and growing through it until you make the space to accept what is actually happening. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, and reminds me of a quote by which I love, from Maya Angelou, and she says, if you can't change your circumstances, change your attitude. And you know, nasty stuff happens. It happens to all of us. Every single person on this planet has a story, at least one story. Many of us have several, but it's when we acknowledge what the situation is, we accept it, and then we can do something about it. But it's when we're constantly fighting and trying to see, you know, challenging really, I guess. But once you accept what is, then things, you know, the obstacles seems to fall away, don't they? And then we can move forward. So Kimber, tell us about your some of your stories, whatever. I know you have a few stories, but you know, whatever ones you want to share that helped you to come to this realization.
I would say I battled with clinical depression for a very long time. From the age of 8 to 30, I was medicated for that. And even within that time frame of being medicated, I was still suicidal and attempted to take my own life more than once, and was always depressed. They weren't curing the depression. They were simply kind of an aid. They did help a little bit. However, I needed to do the personal work within myself to shift my mindset and come to a point in my life where I can be positive and actually loving my life and not feel like every day is a struggle, which is where I was because of the constant fighting before, the constant resistance, the unwillingness to accept what is because I was too focused on what I thought it was supposed to be. So the biggest thing that created that shift for me was when my fiance at the time passed away, and it had been close to a year, I guess, of struggling. He was addicted to drugs, and he was also recently diagnosed as a schizophrenic. So I was caring for him and just really putting everything into caring for him and making sure our household was running and all of that. And when he passed away, it was like the carpet was ripped out from underneath of me, because I had built all of myself around who I was in that relationship and who I was as the that was my role. I was the caretaker. I was supposed to save him. This was my job, this was my duty, this was my purpose. So when that was gone, I was like, why the hell am I still here? Excuse the language, but that was the feeling. Like, why am I here right now, right? It's a complete shift to have to start over and build your purpose over again. So in that shift, I had to learn to accept. I had to learn to accept where I was and what had happened and all that I had been through, and learn to not see that as wasted energy or as an ended path. Learn to see it as the path unfolding. And I had to begin to look for how I could grow through this situation and what positive effects I could bring in the world from the experience I had had. And that is where my life really began to change. And from that point, I came off of all of those medications and found more permanent solutions to my thought processes, my thought patterns, and started practicing mindfulness and meditation and things like this to help establish my own sense of inner peace. But what really brought that inner peace for me was the acceptance, the ability to accept, yes, this may not be a pleasant thing happening in my life, but there is still something here for me to learn from it. There is a way for me to grow through it. And if I can shift my energy to focus on that instead of focusing on the fight, I can move through it and I can be stronger in the process. And that is a completely transformational experience, to go from feeling that the world is against you and that you're always being pulled down or throttled down, right? To realizing that the energy in the universe, or whatever you believe in, is supporting you always and bringing you the things that you need to learn and grow, even though it may not always be easy. Sometimes it's difficult, I know. But we can find that and we can move through it and we can be stronger and we can be passionate and we can create a new trajectory for our life with all of the things that we are gaining through these painful experiences.
How long ago was it, Kimber, that you came to this realization? You mentioned the sad situation of your fiance, which I'm really sorry to hear about, but how long ago was that in terms of where you are now in your life?
That was about 12 years ago.
Okay, and you mentioned, did you say 8 years old, 8 to 30, you were on medication?
Yes.
How the bleep can somebody get beyond medication for so long? You must have been kind of living a false reality in a false world, I guess, but without maybe even realizing it.
Yes, I do feel that way. I do feel that way. And like I said, I do believe that medications are helpful. I think that they may have saved my life for a time period there, but I also think it's important that when we're using these medications to also do the internal work, the conscious work, to create the changes in our own thought patterns so that we're not dependent on them for all of our lives.
Absolutely, and there is a place for what I call the integrative approach. So you take the best of what the medics can offer, but alongside that, there's an awful lot of work that we can do to help ourselves. I'm sure I mentor people through cancer, and that again, there's no one size fits all with that. You have to accept where somebody is, but help them to accept where they are. And again, it's the power of acceptance. People are often challenging and fighting and so on. And a lot of illnesses, people say, well, I'm fighting this, I'm fighting that. Well, stop fighting. It's not a fight. It is where you're at. You are in this situation. Wise up. Find out what you can do to help yourself, and clearly you've come out the other side. So fast forward then, you now help people in some ways, in many ways, from reading your biog. Tell us the ways that you used, you mentioned mindfulness, but what other techniques did you use, and how are you using those to help others today?
I use Reiki, and I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
Okay, so I use Reiki, and I also use hypnotherapy in helping my clients, which are kind of two angles to the same goal. They're both altered states of consciousness aimed at helping you to update your thought patterns and feel more connected and at peace. So I use both of those tools with clients, as well as coaching.
Excellent.
And mindfulness techniques, yes.
And sorry, what was that? What was that other technique?
And the mindfulness
Oh,
techniques.
the mindfulness. Yes, yeah, absolutely. So it's a combination. So do you have particular kind of specialist area in a particular? I mean, do you help people with depression or suicidal tendencies or PTSD or I don't know, hormonal things? I mean, what would you regard your specialty as?
I help a variety of people. It's interesting. They're different problems, but they all seem to be the same core things that we focus on. So I guess that many things stem from the same source. And that generally ends up being helping people to build trust in both themselves, in the resources available, and in whatever they believe in as a higher power. So we build trust, which also builds confidence and self-love in the process. And these things seem to help people move through a whole slew of problems, including addictions and PTSD and depression.
Wonderful. How can people get hold of you, Kimber?
I can be contacted on my website. It is www.lovinglighthw.com.
What does the HW stand for?
Holistic wellness.
Okay, lovinglighthw.com. Marvelous. Okay. I ask people for 2 song choices when they come on the show, and you've chosen Blackbird by the Beatles. Why did you choose this one in particular?
I chose this song. I've loved this song ever since I was little. I think my mom used to sing it to me when I was a kid, but I just feel that it is a song about acceptance, about accepting where you are, even when it may not be where you want to be, and taking flight from that situation, seeing what you can do with it and what you still have available to you.
Marvelous. I like that song as well. Funnily enough, I was talking with somebody the other day about well, very similar to the topic, power of acceptance and acknowledgement. I can't remember what we were talking about, but I was saying, you know, don't pretend you're a blackbird if you're a robin. You know, don't try and be a seagull if you're a pigeon. You know, this kind of thing. People tend to compare, don't they, so often. So Blackbird, I shall listen to the lyrics of that when we play that after the interview. The other one you chose, Kimber, is Light is Returning by Charlie Murphy. That's a new one on me. So tell me why you chose that one.
I chose this, well, it's a beautiful song, and I believe that light is always available, that it is we who sometimes lose our awareness of it, but that light and love and support is always there and available to all of us when we are open to receive it. So this is why I chose that one.
Wonderful. And remind us again of your website address.
It is www.lovinglighthw.com.
Fabulous. Thank you very much for your time, Kimber. And we could talk for hours, but unfortunately we are restricted on our time. So thank you very much for spending a few minutes with us this afternoon.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.